Welcome back to my channel, guys. Today I'll be reviewing the Odyssey. This will be my part 2 to my previous video that I uploaded last week. It'll be more spoiler filled. We'll be going more in depth in the movie. I've just come back from seeing it a second time and my thoughts have solidified on the movie. So let's get into it. So the Odyssey, directed by Christopher Nolan, stars Matt Damon, Anne Hathaway, Tom Holland, Robert Pattinson, Charlize Theron, Zendaya, Lupita Nyong'o, and probably other people that I'm forgetting, Benny Safdie. This cast is stacked, and of course I expect nothing less from a Nolan movie. The movie is based off the tale The Odyssey by Homer. It's about an ancient Greek hero, Odysseus, going to war in Troy, winning, and finding his way back home, but encountering a lot of mysterious creatures and people along the way. Now, I will say this is probably one of my favorite Nolan movies ever made. I also think that this is the movie that solidifies Christopher Nolan as the certified GOAT of Hollywood filmmaking, at least in the modern era. If I had to summarize this movie in one word, the only word I can think of is beautiful. Guys, this is a beautiful film. Now, I've been accused of being a Nolan stan, a Nolan you-know-what, but I think it's well-deserved. And honestly, I criticize Nolan on certain things. I'm not an apologist for Nolan, but I just find it extremely difficult to be an average person walking into this movie and not liking it. The second time I watched this movie, and also in the first time, people were clapping at this movie, right? It's not often that people clap at a movie. If you think about it, clapping at a movie is not natural. There's not, physical actors in front of you, right? The experience must be so overwhelming for the audience, right? That we collectively experienced something great that we just feel the need to clap. We're not thinking about if it makes sense or if we're clapping for specific people, right? So I just think that sure, there are people that Nolan makes movies that are not for them, right? And that's fair, and that's fine. But I just think you can't argue that the man, in terms of consistency and in terms of the quality of his craft, is the best in the current modern era. Even who most people, including myself, will consider the greatest director of all time, Steven Spielberg, even he will have a stinker here and there, right? And that doesn't reflect anything on your skill. That's just the nature of filmmaking. Making a good movie, specifically, is one of the most difficult things you can do on earth. Anybody can make a movie. Anybody can pick up an iPhone or a DSLR and shoot something and call it a movie. Now, making something that most people will agree is a good movie, now that is a very hard thing to do, and only very few talented people on the planet can do it. And that's why you don't have so many movie directors, honestly. The fact that Christopher Nolan can release generational movie after generational movie. I mean, his previous movie, Oppenheimer, was a generational, game-changing movie, and he won the Oscar for Best Picture along with a lot of other awards. And then he follows up Oppenheimer with Odyssey. I always root for Nolan. I always think he's going to release a banger. But even I was thinking, how are you going to top Oppenheimer? Even I was thinking okay, Nolan, you set the bar way too high with Oppenheimer. I was thinking that Odyssey will probably be a great movie, but it just will fall short. Or it might be one of his mid movies. Or that it will be a great movie, but just not as good as Oppenheimer. And honestly, guys, I'm shocked. This movie, I actually like it more than Oppenheimer. And I think Oppenheimer is a top 3 Nolan movie. I think Odyssey might have to be a top 2 Nolan movie for me. This movie, guys. All right. Let me not get too ahead of myself. Let me structure this review somewhat. Let me start with the cons. For me, honestly, there's no cons in the movie, but if I really had to think hard about nitpicks and things that might potentially bother maybe you if you watch the movie or other people, I would say, the sound is still kind of an issue, but at this point, you know what you're getting with a Nolan movie. You know his processes. He doesn't use ADR. He's not budging on that. That's just the way he makes his movies. His next movie, I can already predict the con for the next movie. It's going to be the sound, right? So it is what it is. But to be honest with you guys, I think unlike Tenet, I think with this movie, I didn't have any issues following the movie. Like there were certain scenes that I kind of was struggling to follow, at least on my first viewing. But I feel like with this movie, if you watch it a second time, then you will just completely get the story. A lot of the dialogue that is inaudible in the movie is not really all that serious. A lot of the dialogue, like, let me explain it this way. A lot of the times when the dialogue audio is iffy, they'll be saying a sentence and you'll understand the majority of the sentence, and then the only part of the sentence that you don't understand is like the very end. So for example, I'm not saying this is in the movie, this is just the type of scenario that I'm talking about. Matt Damon will scream, "We need to go to the," and then it's like you don't hear the island part, but it's like you can fill in the gaps, right? Like, okay, you meant to say island, but I can't hear that last part, island, right? It's stuff like that. Like, it's not that serious. You can still follow the movie. You'll still understand what's going on. It's just that just expect the audio to fade in certain scenes. But it's not as bad as Tenet, where there's certain parts of Tenet where they start talking and I'm completely lost and I have no idea what's going on. This is not that. This is just certain words get faded out, but you still understand the scenario, you still understand the situation and what the characters are after. Another nitpick that could be mentioned for this movie that you might have issue with is that the editing at certain times can be a little bit quick. It can be a little bit jarring sometimes. Keep in mind that this movie was shot entirely in IMAX 7D film. So because it was filmed mostly on IMAX film cameras, these IMAX film cameras are massive, bulking, machines, right? So a lot of the intimate scenes, they had to use mirrors for the actors to be able to properly project their performance to one another. But I think that for the most part, it's seamless. But there are parts in the movie where you could tell that they are using clever editing to make it seem like the actors are talking one-on-one when they're actually pretty far apart from each other. And in a few scenes, it is a bit jarring with the editing. But again, this doesn't take away from the experience of watching a movie and from understanding the storyline. It's just little, gaps here and there that you might notice. Now, guys, like, I'm being totally honest. Besides those two things, this movie's flawless. There's no flaws in this movie. I might as well just end the video now. I'll delve into the positives, and again, this is my second review. My first review was more of an introduction, so this one I'll be basically just giving you spoiler points. This movie being made in 70mm IMAX in its entirety, this is a technical achievement that should be noted for the history of Hollywood. And the grand scale of this movie is just unmatched. After seeing this, I just can't see it having been made any other way. Like, IMAX is really the only way to watch this movie as intended. The visual effects in this movie are mind-blowing. It feels so realistic. It's been a long time since I watched a movie, a fantasy, sci-fi type movie like this, and felt the realism like this. People often say that visual effects peaked in the 2000s with movies like Pirates of the Caribbean, with the Davy Jones effect, Transformers, the original one that Michael Bay directed. Those effects were hyper realistic, and visual effects have seemed to have downgraded since then. Look, I'm sure there was CGI used in this movie, but just a perfect blend of practical and CG. You don't see this often in movies like this. You just don't see this often. The story for this movie, this is in classic Nolan fashion, non-linearly written, but it all comes together at the end. So the first 30 minutes of this movie is basically getting you acclaim to this world, getting you acclaim to the lore, getting you acclaim to the characters and motivations and backgrounds. I think this movie you definitely need to watch twice. The first act of this movie introduces a lot of things very quickly. Like I said before, the editing is very quick. It'll cut to certain things and they seem insignificant at the time. But you'll see that by the third act, everything comes together so beautifully. It's very rare for a movie, especially nowadays, to have you thinking about it days after you've seen it. And this movie definitely had that impact on me, and I know that it's had impact on other people that have seen it. The reason why I know that is because I still see people making memes about this movie. I see people referencing things from this movie. I see people reposting soundtracks and certain scenes from this movie. And this movie came out a week ago. And in this information age, right, after a day or two, people move on to the next thing, right? The fact that people are still referencing and talking about this movie and reposting things from this movie a week on, it shows you that it connected with the audience. It connected with the general audience, right? Things like the soundtrack from Ludwig Göransson. This might be his greatest soundtrack ever made. The soundtrack is so unique. It's so minimalistic, but it's so effective as well. The soundtrack by Ludwig Göransson is probably his greatest soundtrack ever made. It's probably one of the best scores of the last 20 years. It's so tense, and his soundtrack is, unlike Nolan's previous films, and people have complained about this about Nolan, is that sometimes the soundtrack overpowers the scene, it overpowers the dialogue. But Ludwig, he just hit the perfect pitch in this. The soundtrack is noticeable, yes, it's there, and it slowly intensifies throughout the scene until the scene climaxes. And again, this is a classic Nolan thing that he's done especially well in movies like Inception and Dunkirk, Interstellar. I think Ludwig has really understood Nolan's taste and has mastered the art of the soundtrack sneaking up on you in a certain way. The Troy scene in particular, it's already a tense situation, and the score fits that mood perfectly, right? You're stuck in this horse. Potentially, they've been stuck there for days. It's wet. It's nasty in there. They mentioned in the movie that, you gotta pee, you gotta poop. Too bad you do it in here, right? And it's a horrible situation. People are drowning. People are choking up. And the score is just adding to that tension that you're feeling as an audience member. The soldiers finally get to have some fresh air when they leave the Trojan horse, but that is very shortly lived because they have to execute their plan as quickly as possible. So it dips, and then it builds up and builds up and builds up again until the gates of Troy are open, and then it just kind of explodes with all the rage of the Greeks flooding the city of Troy, right? And that's just very brilliant. And then the siren score, oh my goodness, it's so brilliant. I think it was a risky move for Nolan to not actually allow the audience to hear any type of siren songs, but it ended up paying off big time. I think that Matt Damon, through his acting and through the emotion that Odysseus was feeling in that moment, without needing music, without needing to hear the sirens, he conveyed exactly what the siren sounded like. It was, bro, that scene, Matt Damon, bro, I know he's an amazing actor, but that is one of the single greatest scenes he's performed in. How do you convey both sadness, happiness, regret, literally almost every emotion you can think of? How do you convey that on your face for about 10 seconds, right? I think the scene was about 10 seconds. And it's like you get it. Like everyone in the audience feels it. They feel what he's feeling, right? And then the lines when he's breaking it down, it makes sense out of the emotions that he's been expressing in that scene. And so what we actually hear instead of the actual siren music is a flute harmony, which is very unique. I've never heard a epic big budget movie like this use flute harmony, right? You could even hear someone taking a breath. So it feels very human, very natural, right? I guess what Nolan was going for with this is that he wanted the score to sound like something that could be produced in that era, right? Something that, with the instruments that existed at the time, could possibly exist. And it just adds that extra authenticity to the world and to this film in general. Hoyt van Hoytema does this thing. One of the things, just to let you guys know, I love Oppenheimer. It's one of my favorite movies of the last 20 years. But one of the things that kind of bothered me with Oppenheimer is that a lot of the movie, I believe 75% of the movie is in IMAX. But I feel like that movie doesn't need IMAX. Maybe the bomb scene needed IMAX, but that's probably 5 minutes of the movie, of a 3-hour movie. Most of the movie is intimate talking scenes and close-ups, and the movie is brilliant that way, but I just felt like when I watched it in IMAX, I just kept on seeing Cillian Murphy's face blown up on the screen, and I just felt like it wasn't necessary. I feel like the movie just works better just being played like on a TV or a regular theater. I feel like that subject matter did not make much use of an IMAX film camera. But this movie makes very good use of a IMAX 70mm camera. This movie needed that scale. This movie, the cinematography is already great, but like just the fact that he was able to pull off such an amazing cinematography with such a heavy, complicated camera, he deserves extra props for that. Now I want to talk about the performances. The performances across the board are amazing. Christopher Nolan found a way to make Travis Scott great, albeit he only has really one line to say in the movie, but he delivers it very convincingly. No one's laughing at his line, like people are taking him seriously, and I think he did well in this movie. Christopher Nolan was very smart with how he utilized Travis Scott. I'm sure there were higher forces that wanted, a celebrity like Travis Scott in there to better market the film, but he doesn't take away from the film, He plays the role well, and he does what he needs to do, and it works in the movie. It doesn't feel distracting, it doesn't feel out of place, it works in the movie. Matt Damon has been in this business for so long, and he's been in so many movies, and he's, a legitimate movie star. And I think because of that, we just expect Matt Damon to just give a good performance. So when he does give a good performance, it doesn't really stand out as much. But we need to sit back and just admire the man. In this movie, especially on my second viewing, when I really just got to delve into the story of this movie and analyze it more, and just analyze not just analyze the storyline, but also analyze the performances, the little twitches and the little eye movements that all these actors are doing, and we really have to give props to Matt Damon. He gives a standout performance. I think his performance in this movie is as good as Cillian Murphy's performance was in Oppenheimer. This is one of his greatest performances. He really, if you think about it, this is a very hard performance to pull off. He really gets the physicality right, especially with the time jumping, when he goes to Troy, he's like a superhero, he's physically fit. So he has to go from essentially peak human physical condition to a broken, skinny, can barely walk old man when he returns back to his home in Ithaca. And then from there, it's similar to The Dark Knight Rises, right? He has to regain the strength and convince us that he's this badass that can take on a group of 20 men with one sword and a bow and arrow. And he just pulls that physicality off so amazingly, but also the emotions, the range of emotions that he's portraying on his face alone throughout this movie is incredible. Other standout performances include Anne Hathaway as the Queen. Same thing goes for her performances. The way she goes back and forth between different emotions, she's just so convincing in the role. This is also one of her best performances. I think Tom Holland is underrated in this movie. You don't hear a lot of people give praise to his performance in this movie. I think it's more so just like his character is kind of a character in waiting. Like he doesn't have that much to do, but he does a great performance, and he does a really good job of distancing himself from Spider-Man. Like when I'm watching this movie and I'm watching Tom Holland in this movie, I'm not thinking this is Peter Parker. I'm thinking this is Temelicus, right? So he does a really good job there. Robert Pattinson steals the show. Everyone agrees that this guy, his character is so nasty. He's so, you just hate him, right? He does everything possible for you to hate him, and he does such a great job at it, It's so good that at some point, I just don't even want to see Robert Pattinson's face in general, right? I just kind of hate even the actor, even. That's how good his performance is. Overall, I think this movie really does solidify Christopher Nolan as a master filmmaker. I'm watching this movie, I'm just thinking, this is a master artist at his peak. He has achieved something that most filmmakers have not achieved. He has done back-to-back generational movies. He is the GOAT. Now look, I'm not saying that he can't mess up. I'm not saying that all his movies are perfect. But I'm just saying this is a type of movie that you just don't see often, especially in the modern era. This is a very rare type of movie. I have to be careful with my words here. But this is a very unique experience. This is something you don't see often. This is very much made for the theater. Some of you might disagree with this, but similarly to the first Avatar movie, right? My first time watching that movie was on a Blu-ray. A lot of people's first time watching it was, on home video. But people that saw the first Avatar movie in theaters when it came out, People will tell you it's a completely different experience than watching it on TV. Watching it on TV, a lot of people think the movie's just okay, right? But watching it in theaters when it came out in 2009, in 3D especially, those people that watched it in that original format, they think it's the greatest movie ever, right? Or at least they thought that at the time of watching it. So there's a big divide, right, between people that have seen Avatar in theaters when it came out versus people that saw it for the first time on TV. I think this is in that category, and I think this is a way stronger movie than any of the Avatar movies. So I still think that you're gonna end up loving this movie watching it on your TV, but it's just a different experience watching it in theaters. It's hard to explain. You just kind of have to go to the theaters and trust me on this and just watch it there. Overall, guys, the nitpicks, those are things I think about after watching the movie, and like I have to think hard about the nitpicks, right? But honestly, while watching this movie, I have no flaws. I have nothing negative to say about this movie. This is one of the rare 10 out of 10s that I'll give a movie. You might have some nitpicks with it. I'm not saying that everybody's gonna love it, but I think at the very least, I could say confidently most people are going to like this movie, at least at the bare minimum. A lot of people have been asking, what's Christopher Nolan's next movie? What's his next movie? And I think this movie gives you a hint of what his next movie is going to be. This movie really, more so than any other Nolan movie, introduces a lot of horror elements. And we've seen a little bit of horror elements also in Oppenheimer. And Oppenheimer is giving a speech out of college, and he's having visions of some of the students getting their face burned by the nuclear blast. This movie delves a lot more into the horror side of it. There are surprisingly a few jump scares in this movie, and in both of my showings of this movie, people have jumped at the same spots, which surprised me. So I think we could see from this movie that Nolan is more open to exploring the horror genre, or at least elements of the horror genre. And I predict that his next movie either will be a horror movie or it will be something akin to a horror movie, like a thriller. Alright, that's it for my review of The Odyssey. Let me know what you think in the comments. Make sure to like and subscribe, and stay tuned for my next review for Spider-Man Brand New Day coming this Wednesday.